I'm very excited to welcome Senator Jon Ossoff from Georgia to LA to our studio here. It's great to see you.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Slow news year. It's good to have you in the studio. Okay, so let's just get into it. So earlier this week, MSNBC reported that the Justice Department is planning to indict former FBI Director Jim Comey for allegedly lying to Congress. This announcement came a couple days after Trump fired the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia and installed his own personal attorney, someone named Lindsay Halligan, who I believe ABC News reported was presented with a memo recommending she decline to bring charges, but it sounds like she's going to pursue them anyway. She has no prosecutorial experience, so it kind of tells you everything you need to know, I think. What's your reaction to these reports and what they tell us about rule of law in this country?
Well, that the rule of law is hanging by a thread in the United States right now. We have public enemies lists, DOJ drawing up orders to U.S. attorneys to investigate political targets. Makes me think of, there's an expression I think attributed to like a Stalinist official in the USSR, which was something like, bring me the man and I'll find you the crime.
Right, yeah.
It is such a perversion of justice. And it's also just another piece of proof that the thing about Trump is that every accusation that he makes is actually like a deep confession of his true intent. And he is weaponizing the Department of Justice and the entire federal government as a political instrument. This effort to crush the opposition, destroy the pillars of authority that might oppose or criticize him, stifle dissent, make examples of his enemies and adversaries using the force of law is so deeply un-American, and I think one of the most significant threats to the basic fabric of our republic in well over a century.
In other in other legal news, Trump accused United Nations employees of sabotaging his UN visit because someone briefly turned off an escalator. His surrogates are suggesting this was a grave assault on the president and first lady, and Trump himself tweeted, "The people that did it should be arrested," end quote. To the best of your knowledge, is it a crime to turn off an escalator?
It's like I'm sure that all the folks in Georgia who are, losing access to labor and delivery services, or maybe to an ICU because of these Medicaid cuts, or whose groceries have gone up 8% in a year, will be relieved that the president's investigating escalator failures in New York City.
Would you consider passing a law to make escalator sabotage a felony?
I'll have to give that some consideration.
Okay, we can double back on this one. So we appear to be close to a government shutdown. On Thursday, Trump's Office of Management and Budget sent a memo to agencies telling them to identify programs and projects and activities that can be permanently eliminated in the event of a shutdown, as opposed to just a temporary furlough. In other words, they're sort of signaling that they think the shutdown could expedite the DOJ efforts that we've all talked about so much. Do you think that we're going to shut down the government, and do you think that's the right thing to do?
As of our taping this, I think it's too soon to tell, but it doesn't bode well that the president is refusing even to meet with opposition leaders in Congress. I do think this is a big mistake from OMB and the White House and Russ Vought. The mass firings and the DOJ effort were hugely destructive and hugely unpopular. I mean, there's a reason that they kicked Elon to the curb, at least publicly. Like in Georgia, a quarter of CDC employees have been pushed out, or they've tried to push him out. The American public doesn't like mass firings, and I know that it sparks joy in Trump's West Wing to fire hundreds of thousands of public servants. But if what they plan to do is to refuse to talk, in refusing to talk, force a shutdown, and then sort of rampage, the public's going to turn pretty quickly against that. So I think it's seriously overplaying his hand for the budget director.
So, I mean, this shutdown talk kind of brings me to bigger anxiety I hear from Democrats, which is they feel like Trump poses this existential threat to the fabric of our country, but that the current leaders of the Democratic Party are not necessarily meeting the moment. It's, the criticism is like, the leadership isn't using the little power they have to block enough stuff that Trump is doing. They feel like leadership is terrible at communicating and that Trump is running circles around us in terms of messaging. What would you say to those Democrats who are anxious and who frankly want to see younger senators, the next generation of elected officials like yourself, in leadership roles?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say I get all that. And I completely understand the apprehension, the fear that people feel right now, the frustration. I also think just to level with folks, there is no magic button that senators aren't pushing, right? They would have pushed it on day one. And we do have to wield the powers that we have as the minority in the opposition to limit the damage and try to contain this out of control executive. But as I look ahead to the midterm elections and think about the generational obligation that we have to win, right? Like, I think that we as citizens right now have an obligation to deliver a landslide victory in these midterms that is as profound as any moral obligation any group of citizens has had throughout our country's history. We have to win these elections. And there are two things that worry me. Because we have the wind in our sails. I'm holding rallies across Georgia that I barely promote that thousands of people are coming to. You all remember, I ran in the first big U.S. House race after Trump was elected the first time. Then those double header, double overtime Senate runoffs for the Senate majority in 2021. So I have run at the most dramatic moments of the Trump era.
Yeah, no pressure in those races.
And I've never seen opposition energy and determination like I'm seeing right now. And even all of the angst that's directed at the Democratic Party is actually a good sign in that it shows the passion that people feel to oppose this and to right the ship. What worries me is that we're a little too in our own heads.
In what sense?
In the sense that a loss of faith, a loss of confidence in our ability as citizens to use the rights we have as citizens to shape this country's future because we're doom scrolling in the fetal position, right? Or waiting for some charismatic savior to ride in as a national figure who will fix all this. We have a president who is completely out of control, a crook engaged in unprecedented, brazen personal corruption, who is passing one of the most unpopular agendas in American history. The public is turning against him. The opposition is motivated. We can win, and we have to win. But we don't have the luxury of despair or self-pity or kind of wallowing in doubt. So I just want folks to focus on what we can control. And yes, we in Congress have obligations to rise to this moment, and all of us have obligations to work like hell to win these midterm elections and to restore some checks and balances to Washington.
All right, I'll take that as a pump-up speech. I'll stop doom scrolling for that. That works for me.
Just cut the doom scrolling in half.
Yeah, that's honestly a good note. You mentioned the corruption of this whole thing. Yeah. I think it's the most undercovered story of the administration is the corruption that's happening in plain sight. I mean, some of it's not in plain sight. We heard about Tom Homan getting the border czar, getting a kava bag with $50 grand in it.
Who among us?
You never just done one of these? Apparently he was going to get 50 grand in exchange for government contracts. Then every time Trump goes on a foreign trip, Don Jr. or Eric follows behind, right? And they announce $1 billion real estate deal. We got a golf course in Vietnam. We got a tower in Dubai, whatever. And then for me, it's the crypto is the main event. There was this big New York Times story the other day that alleged basically a quid pro quo between the Trump organization, the Trump family, and the United Arab Emirates, in which this Emirati-linked investment company put $2 billion into Trump's crypto company. And then shortly after, the administration agreed to sell the Emiratis very advanced AI chips, a huge national security consideration was at play. How do you think we can get people to notice and care about this stuff? Because I feel like when I try to tell people in my life who are just kind of normie voters, they're like, all politicians are corrupt. They all do this kind of thing. They throw some Hunter Biden line at me. And then What can Congress do about it if we actually win the midterms?
So a few thoughts on the corruption. First of all, I think we have to absolutely hammer away at it and make sure that the public sees it and understands it, because it is like the most shocking, brazen, and overt abuse of power in presidential history by degrees of magnitude. We're talking about billions of dollars, a lot of it through cryptocurrency vehicles directly to the first family. And he's got his personal envoy, right? Like his sort of roving diplomat, Steve Witkoff,
yeah.
who, by the way, the wars that they promised to end are still raging, whose son is doing business with the Trump boys in this World Liberty Financial vehicle that foreign sovereign wealth funds are pouring billions of dollars into. You know, there is good reason to believe that they are shaping American grand strategy around the personal financial interests of the first family. And the hypocrisy is stunning. Like, one of the things I said at a rally a few months ago was, like, Hunter Biden should have been more ambitious. Like, you know, this is an insane level of corruption and self-enrichment. But I think there's a deeper story here about corruption in American politics, which is something the Democratic Party needs to focus on, which is that Trump, in my view, is a symptom of the deeper corruption in our politics. Like, how is it that we have a demagogue who promises to tear it all down, elected twice to the presidency? It's in part because much of the American public has lost faith in our political system.
Totally agree.
And with just cause. Since Citizens United, this political system has been corruption on steroids. And that is a big part of why policy doesn't serve ordinary people. So as Trump poses this sort of radical threat to the rule of law and the Constitution, things that we have to protect, we can't just become mere guardians of the status quo. We have to be about change and reform. And money in politics is like the root of all of this. We have to focus on that. You know, the vast sums of corporate and billionaire money in our political system, with or without Trump, are why ordinary people are so ill-served by elected officials and by Congress. We need to take up that mantle and run with it. And if we don't solve this problem, even once we put Trump back in the box in the midterms and once he's gone, the country will still be in deep trouble.
So look, I totally agree with you. I worked for Barack Obama in the Senate in 2006, and there was this big scandal for the old heads out there. You might remember Jack Abramoff, who was this sketchy lobbyist who was, you know, giving people boxes at, you know, football games and stuff. It was a deep, corrupt scandal. And so Democrats ran hard on a reform agenda in the 2006 midterms and did incredibly well. And Barack Obama was kind of out in front of that. And so I totally agree with you. I've seen both the necessity of it, right? I agree that money is kind of the original sin for a lot of our political problems, but also the political upside of it. I guess the question is, what does that reform agenda look like? Is it no PAC money, no lobbyist money? Are we talking about stock trading from members of Congress? Like, how are you thinking about what that
all
is?
Of these things and more. I mean, you know, I have been championing legislation to ban members of Congress from trading stock. My campaigns have not taken contributions from corporate PACs or from federal lobbyists. I've introduced a bill to ban corporate PACs. You know, the American people understand that the system really is rigged. But Trump is not unrigging it. He's re-rigging it for himself and his personal financial interest and his family's financial interest. So, you know, we have to be about change and recognize that the public's complaints are legit. This isn't working for people, and we have better solutions.
And it's so hard, right? Because some of this is like it feels like a financial arms race. You know, like we need to make sure we're raising as much as they are. Now, every candidate has a super PAC. We're spending billions in presidential elections. And I think there's a concern. I mean, you see it with redistricting too, right? Like Trump's doing this mid-year redistricting in Texas. So Democrats are fighting fire with fire in California. I think that's the right thing to do, but I do worry it kind of muddies up our efforts at being the reform party.
Yeah, I hear that concern. I mean, I think that what we have to acknowledge is that the corruption is bipartisan, right? The whole Congress is captured by big money. And people want to hear that we recognize that because it's true, right? And so
and obvious.
And obvious. And, you know, like you take something like, taxes on the ultra rich. It's almost like an 80-20 issue in public opinion, right? But everyone knows that the reason that it never happens is because of the financial power and therefore the political power of super wealthy people, regardless of who's in charge.
Right.
So, you know, we have to focus on, not exclusively, but we have to make sure people are aware that Donald Trump, his administration, are engaged in some of the most brazen and overt corruption. It's happening like in the world right now, right? I mean, they're operating like some of the most shameless foreign leaders who mix state business with family wealth and personal business. But we also have to get at the underlying corruption in American politics.
Yeah, it's like autocrats and their princelings and their oligarchs. It's just a mess. Switching gears a little bit, I just want to talk about freedom of speech in this country at this moment. Listeners have probably followed the saga of Jimmy Kimmel. Kimmel was pulled off the air after he made a joke about Trump's reaction to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Then earlier this week, Kimmel was put back on the air. That enraged Trump. Trump called the show an illegal campaign contribution and suggested he'd once again be suing ABC, noting, quote, "Last time I went after them, they gave me $16 million. This one sounds even more lucrative," end quote. How concerned are you, or at all, about the FCC's actions in this case? And then just sort of like the totality of the threats to free speech we've seen since January of this year.
Yeah, we should all be extremely concerned by this. I mean, you got the president standing on Air Force One threatening to take news broadcasters off the air because he thinks their coverage is too negative, right? This is North Korea. I mean, it is so beyond the pale. And, you know, before I was a candidate for any office, I ran a business that produced investigative journalism for international news media. We held power to account. We exposed war crimes, human rights abuses, undercover investigations of official corruption. Once you chill and stifle and destroy the free press, you know, that is how authoritarianism really entrenches. And I think that their agenda is very clear and extremely dangerous. And actually, you know, I got to give at least, like, I know the bar is very low, but there were a couple of Republican elected officials who spoke out on it.
For sure.
We have to reach out to folks on the other side and try to make sure this does not become a partisan issue. And again, the public is with us, right? I mean, getting back to reasons for us to feel optimistic about our prospects to win next year, just like the country is against defunding hospitals and nursing homes to cut taxes for the rich, the American people are against official censorship. And this is a deep betrayal of some of what they proclaimed to their followers animated their campaign, right?
Yep.
The sort of railing against the excesses of cancel culture. And you've seen among some of their supporters that they're shaken by this betrayal of those supposed principles.
Yeah, I agree. And also, look, I think people also have to understand the context of that kind of a threat to free speech or news gathering or investigative journalism like you are working on. When that's coming from the U.S. government, that is terrifying, because it's also, there's like spyware for hire everywhere these days. There's groups like the NSO group that are buying this, you know, hacking software like Pegasus.
Yeah, ICE just opened a contract with them.
Did they really, with the NSO group?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I think it's the successor. It's like Paragon, I think it's called.
Oh, yes. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just saying that these journalists are under threat from every direction, financially, from rogue states, from spyware for hire, and now from the FCC. It's like, it's pretty scary stuff.
Well, I think the other piece of this that it's like more complicated, but potentially equally dangerous, is the use of official power to bully tech companies into how they run the algorithm
Mm-hmm.
that delivers content to people, right? Like threatening to take NBC off the air because you think that their coverage is too negative is obviously like a brazen, unconstitutional, un-American attempt at a sort of classic form of censorship. But, if they go to Meta, or they go to Musk, or this group of allies who may now be running TikTok,
Mm-hmm.
and they say,
Turn the dial.
turn the dial.
Yeah.
That is a more subtle, but in this world that we're living in, potentially more powerful way
Agreed.
for them to control the information that gets to the public.
Yeah, it's insidious. You mentioned some of the Republicans saying the right thing about free speech. Someone like Ted Cruz, for example, came out and said the FCC chairman was acting like a mob boss out of Goodfellas, and like good for Ted Cruz for saying that. I think if he were sitting at this table, and we were kind of, pointing the finger at him and what the FCC was doing, he would respond along the lines that you just did. Well, during the Biden administration, the White House was going to tech companies and telling them to censor speech around COVID or, social issues, et cetera. Do you think that the Democrats or the Biden administration overreached at that point in ways that in hindsight were maybe showed less of a commitment to free speech than we should have been showing?
I think probably yes in some cases. But I think that the whataboutism is like pretty limited in its validity because we're talking about things that are vastly different, right? And I think federal courts rebuked the Biden administration for some of the way that the tech companies were being talked to about information about public health that was coming out during the COVID pandemic, right? And that was probably overreach. But it's nothing like the president saying, I'm going to take broadcasters off the air because their coverage is too negative. So, we should not, we obviously need to practice what we preach and acknowledge where there may have been mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But let's not for a moment indulge the lie that these are equivalent in any way.
Yeah. You mentioned ICE buying the Pegasus-like software, working with the NSO groups, whatever their new corporate name is. I know your office has been investigating ICE and human rights abuses in U.S. immigration detention facilities. Can you just talk to us about what you guys have found?
Yeah, well, I've been investigating not just Homeland Security facilities, but federal prisons, state and local prisons and jails since I was elected. I mean, and that has been sort of the continuity of effort for me, having left investigative journalism and entering office.
Mm-hmm.
The oversight muscles in Congress are so atrophied, right? Like most of the oversight is partisan oversight, and very little of it is just pure public interest oversight.
Can you explain the distinction in your mind?
Yeah, so most of the oversight in Congress is like one party investigating the other party's efforts. And, there's a role for that in ensuring that there's accountability, right? Like you have to have that kind of hostile exchange in order to ensure that things are brought into the public light and debated no matter who's in power. But what gets neglected is oversight that's essential for principled moral reasons, human rights reasons, but for which there's no obvious political reward. Like there's not a lot of political upside to investigating the abuse of federal inmates.
Right.
And so we have this federal prison system where there's this ongoing multi-decade human rights crisis that gets very little attention from Congress. So I've led investigations of corruption and civil rights abuses in federal prisons, of uncounted deaths in state and local prisons and jails. One investigation from 2 or 3 years ago, it was a bipartisan investigation where the ranking member on the subcommittee I led was Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, not exactly a fellow traveler ideologically, right?
Not even close.
But, I got him to work with me on an investigation into an ICE detention facility in Georgia where we found, and it was a bipartisan finding, that multiple female immigration detainees at this facility had been subjected to unnecessary invasive and in some cases non-consensual gynecological surgical procedures while in
surgical
U.S. detention.
procedures?
Surgical procedures.
Jesus Christ.
So I say all that to say that my efforts to investigate human rights abuses in prisons, jails, and detention facilities is not new. This year, I opened a new inquiry anticipating that there would be an even higher level of brutality by this administration in these facilities. And what we had found through July was more than 500 credible reports of human rights abuses in DHS detention facilities, including of pregnant women, children, some of whom were U.S. citizens. And the last thing I'll just say about this, because I think it just speaks to like the character of this administration, is I released that report. Within like 90 minutes, the administration just issued a blanket denial and basically said everything is fine in all of our facilities and this is all lies.
I read their response.
Yeah.
It literally didn't seem to engage on the substance of any of the specifics in your report.
No, I mean, it's just denied. They do not care. And it really saddens me to say it, but I think that there are some folks in this administration and at this White House who relish the brutality of the system they're creating.
Yeah, clearly they do. I'm going to jump around a little bit because we're getting to the end. So, speaking of gross human rights violations, a few minutes ago, right before we started recording, Trump told reporters, quote, "I will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. Nope, I won't allow it. It's not going to happen." And then speaking about the war, he said, "There's been enough. It's time to stop now." Do you believe him? Do you see any evidence that the administration is exerting pressure on the Israeli government either to stop the war in Gaza or prevent annexation in the West Bank?
No, there is to date zero pressure. And the reality is that the slow motion annexation of the West Bank has been the Likud and Netanyahu policy ongoing now for many, many years. I mean, it is like a work in progress. Mm-hmm. So, I suppose that is a welcome statement, but I am pretty skeptical that it'll be met with any kind of policy. One thing I do want to say about this while we're on the subject, and since we've been talking about the role of the press, is, international media have been launching yet another push to call for access for journalists to Gaza. And I just want to lend my voice and support to that effort. I've seen personally through the work that I've helped lead and produce how essential it is to have independent journalism in places where there's armed conflict, to hold warring parties to account where there are serious human rights abuses. And the continued exclusion of journalists from Gaza is completely unacceptable. And I want to state unequivocally my support for that call and once again call on the Israeli government to permit journalists to access that area.
It really is amazing. It's been nearly 2 years, no press access. I mean, there's some incredibly brave Palestinian journalists on the ground providing vital reporting, video evidence, and doing so at great risk to themselves. I mean, hundreds of journalists in Gaza have been killed throughout the conflict by Palestinian airstrikes or God knows what else. But yeah, I think it's a really important and not widely understood fact, frankly, about the war.
Yeah.
Former Vice President Kamala Harris, she got a book out. You may have heard it's ruffling some feathers in the Democratic Party. One piece in particular, she wrote that Joe Biden's decision to run for re-election was reckless. Do you agree with that characterization?
Well, I think that events have proven it to be the wrong decision. I mean, I was not in the room, but I think it's clear that he wasn't up for it. And by the time the decision was made to make a change, it was very, very late in the game.
Do you think that's like a one-off situational challenge? Look, I think back to that time and I felt in my heart that I knew Joe Biden was too old. But I kind of wondered like what value there was. I mean, after the debate, it was obvious, right? And people were like, he's got to go. He's got to, step down. But I think when he ran, we all thought he was going to be a bridge, maybe just a 1-term president, and then hand the reins over to somebody else for a contested primary. Do you think that there was something preventing, I don't know, a more honest conversation about his prospects within the Democratic Party? Because the data was there. Voters were telling us he was too old. Focus groups, they were telling us he was too old. We just didn't listen to the mounds and mounds of data that was out there.
I think that the most brutally honest answer to that question is, when you're facing the specter of Donald Trump potentially being reelected to the presidency, and you have in the sitting president the presumptive nominee, it's understandable that you're not going to be inclined to do or say things that might weaken that presumptive nominee against Trump, given the threat that he posed and poses. But, I think that, look, I think the other piece of this, and one of the reasons that I think, Democrats across the country, you mentioned, they have this, and I hear this everywhere, right? Like this longing for public leadership, right? And for folks to follow, and for a clear voice and a clear rallying cry. And I say this with all due respect to the former president, and I think he achieved some pretty extraordinary things while he was in office, things that certainly helped Georgia on insulin prices and clean energy manufacturing. But we did not have a powerful voice communicating and leading for much of the latter half of that term. And that certainly contributed to the defeat in the election. But what I think what we need that we haven't had in a long time is a deep and compelling story and vision about where the country is and where the country needs to go. And so the lack of a strong presidential voice for an extended period there took a toll, no doubt.
Yeah, definitely did. You have a big re-election coming up. I saw outside groups are already announcing how many millions they're going to spend against you. How are you guys feeling about the state of the race? What do folks need to know, and how can they help you out?
Yeah, look, this will be the biggest Senate race of the midterms, and I keep happening to run in these huge consequential elections, but I'm the only Democrat running for re-election in the state that Donald Trump won. So I'm their number one target. They want the seat. And what a couple of Republican colleagues have told me privately is they also, the GOP wants me gone, right? For all the reasons that we've just discussed. They don't want fresh voices, young blood in the opposition, right? That sometimes I joke to people, no disrespect to anyone out there, but it's like I work in the most powerful and prestigious senior center in America. And so they have a lot of motivation to defeat me. They spent $310 million or so to try to fend me off the first time.
So much money for a
I expect that they will spend like $500 million to try to beat me this time. And so my message to folks, and I say it just to be very, very real, is please help, right? Go to electjon.com, support the campaign, do what you can, $10, $15. We don't have the luxury of despair right now. We cannot spend the next 15 months wringing our hands and in worry and depression. We have to win these elections. We need to win in a landslide. We need to be in a winning mindset. We need to recognize that we're facing an unpopular president doing immense damage to the country. We have the wind at our backs. And as long as we don't defeat ourselves, we're going to win. But it is going to take resources. So please support my campaign.
It's a great pitch. You don't think The Villages is a more distinguished retirement? Last question. So you have a 3-year-old and a 4-month-old?
Yeah.
So between that...
That's about the same age as your kids, right?
Yeah, I've got a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. So I guess between that parenting and the re-election, you sleep sometime in 2030. Is that the goal?
God bless my wife. I love you, Alicia. It is the world's tiniest violin and everything, but it is sort of the toughest part. Obviously, is the time away from kids, because you've got kids this age. It's like
physically painful.
And like when they're so young, every week it's like a whole new
Yep.
so many new discoveries, new personalities. So, but it also motivates me, to understand the stakes for the next generation. But yeah, I mean, my wife's a practicing physician. She's an OB doctor in Georgia, and we're blessed to have these beautiful children. And
My God, you guys are a busy house.
busy, but people ask me how I'm doing. It's like as long as our children are healthy, that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Do you guys I don't know if you do screen time. Do you have a favorite show like Miss Rachel House, Bluey, Daniel Tiger?
So Eva, who's the 3-year-old, she watches a lot of ballet.
Okay.
She watches a lot of Winnie the Pooh. By the way, a lot. Like, we limit the screen time.
Of course.
But when she just got into this, I don't know if I should be like plugging TV shows on the show, but she just started watching, I think it's like an Irish show called Puff and Rock, which is very cute.
Puff and Rock? Okay.
Little animals living on it. So if you're looking for
I'm writing that down.
for safe, nurturing content, I recommend it.
My daughter is now doing ballet.
Yeah, so is Eva.
Okay, but did she do it in the tap shoes, the old school kind?
She's got little she's just in like pink socks.
Okay, yeah. Lizzie's got little tap shoes, and they're fun until she jumps on her brother's foot, and then we got problems. Do you have a preferred duty? Are you like giving bottles, diapers, general tidying?
I do it all.
Yeah.
I mean, and I really relish it. Like my team, if they had their way, much love to my team, but my team, if they had their way, would have me, all day, every weekend. When I first got to the Senate, I sat down with I mentioned that, it is a body of very mature statespeople.
Uh-huh.
I sat down with a very, very, very senior member and sort of asked for some advice. And what this senator told me was, he was like, Jon, I don't remember a single fish fry, chicken dinner, county fair or whatever that I felt like I had to go to, but I missed. But I remember every ballet recital, soccer game, birthday party that I miss. Like, don't be like me. So I have just walled off time.
Some Cat Stevens, Cats in the Cradle shit right there.
I have just like walled off time, and
That's
I don't want to have the regret of having missed their childhood.
No, that's tough. Well, listen, it sounds like it's good life balance there. Senator Ossoff, thank you so much for doing the show. Everyone, what's that website again?
It's electjon.com. Hey, just one more note. Like, I know it is really tough and it's bleak, and okay, but it's not Jim Crow. Okay, like, Americans have been through a lot and gotten through a lot and built a better, more beautiful, more just country. So this is our challenge. This is our moment. Let's just rise to it and win.
Yeah, I bet 1963 was pretty scary.
Yeah.
JFK getting shot, Jim Crow. Yeah. Wise words. Senator, thank you.
Thank you.